Welcome, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Co-Girls on Air, a podcast exploring all things technology, female leadership, careers, education, and topics within the nonprofit sector. On this episode, we interviewed Kylie Gursky, who is the director at the Women's Foundation of Montana. Join Makayla and Kylie to hear more of her story.
Welcome, Kylie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, of course. Do you think you could start by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background and your career?
Sure. So my name is Kylie Gursky. My pronouns are she and her, and I live here in Helena, Montana, with my partner and a couple of dogs and chickens. Currently, I am the director of the Women's Foundation of Montana, and I have been for about 3 years now. The Women's Foundation makes grants to organizations across the state that are working to just make a difference in the lives of women and girls. And we fund a wide variety of projects, and full disclosure, Code Girls United is one of our grantees. We are super lucky to be able to support your work. And that is, yeah, it makes it kind of, extra special to be here today. But yeah, we fund a really wide variety of work. We fund work that helps women build wealth and assets. We fund work that provides direct services to women around like essential and basic needs. And then we also fund work that does leadership, skill development for women and girls across state. So yeah, my background, I grew up in Montana and moved to Washington about halfway through high school and graduated from Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington, which is feels like a sister city to Missoula. They're very familiar, probably why I was drawn to it. I did a combined major in philosophy, economics, and political science, which was supposed to lead me to law, but instead just I went right into the nonprofit sector after that. So I did AmeriCorps for a couple of years, and then worked in youth philanthropy with an organization called Common Sense. And then worked with adults in philanthropy with an organization called Social Justice Fund Northwest, based out of Seattle, Washington. But it was my hope always to get back to Montana, and I was able to do that about 8 years ago when I moved back and I started working for a civic engagement organization called Montana Women Vote. And was super lucky to work with them for about 5 years, and they work to engage low-income women in the democratic process. And then came to the Women's Foundation. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you mentioned how you were originally going to lead into law, but then ended up making the shift. What was kind of the turning point in that?
Well, I think I went for the major, not realizing that it was a pre-law program.
Gotcha.
I was just interested, I think, in the big ideas in philosophy, and I think it
nice.
being, a little more grounded in economics and political science, I thought was a really practical application of these big theoretical ideas. And I actually for a long time, I think I always knew I wanted to go into the nonprofit sector, but I think for a long time I wanted to be a teacher, because both my parents were public school teachers, and I'd only really been in school up until that point. So I think part of it was I didn't know what else to do. But I right out of college, I did 2 years of AmeriCorps. And the first year I was able to work in a school setting, and I think I had the realization that what I would rather do was work with the teachers and work with other adults rather than work sort of in the elementary school setting with children. And I think it's because I wanted to problem solve with people. And so that's why I was really attracted to sort of working in the nonprofit sector alongside people that were interested in just sort of digging into some of the problems that big problems that we face, and interested in working on them together. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah. Teaching is
Yeah.
a very different ballgame. So I get why
Yeah.
you'd want to maybe not do that right away.
Yeah.
So what surprised you most when you were starting out in the nonprofit sector?
Um, I mean, I think I was just shocked at the really wide variety of issues that you could address, that you could, have a job, you could get paid to like go out and do good in the world and make change. I think that one of the things that I hear again and again and again, particularly in my work at the Women's Foundation and doing civic engagement work, is how hard it is to work your full-time job, take care of your family, and
Yeah.
stay engaged. Yeah,
Hmm.
and informed, that it's all just like it can all feel so overwhelming. So I think what surprised me was how many people were like, well, I'm going to make my career doing just that then. And it feels really lucky. So yeah.
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 No, I get it. Well, and you mentioned staying engaged still. And I think a big problem with some people is they go into a field because they love it and then they lose their love for it because it turns
Yeah.
into just work. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So I'm glad you've been able to keep that passion. So, in
Yeah.
your opinion, what's one personality trait someone would need to have to be successful in kind of the field you're in now?
Well, so I would say that working in sort of the philanthropic sector of
Hmm.
the nonprofit field. So working in philanthropy, my particular area is like I work in fundraising and in grant making. So
Hmm.
it's not, I mean, the fun part is always giving away money because it's always such a positive thing.
Right. Yeah.
And
Everybody's happy with that.
exactly. Everybody's happy with that. I don't know too many people who are like, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up. It's never something I've come across with young people. But I will say that I think that like it's necessary. It's like a necessary thing in the nonprofit sector to be able to do fundraising and to want to do it. And I think one of the personality traits that someone would need to be successful, both in fundraising and in grant making, is to be able to see complex issues from multiple angles.
Mm.
Um, and I think so. I think to be able to do that, you need both critical thinking skills and empathy.
Mhm.
And I think you need both of those because you need to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Um, I think, especially when you're fundraising, you need to think like, what does this person care about? Where like they have something that they want to give. And they're only, they're only going to want to do that if they feel really connected
Right.
to like the story or the issue. And so thinking, being able to think about what they care about and being able and well informed enough to connect it to what's going on in Montana. I think it's like being able to make those dots really quickly between people who have resources and are like, I want to do something good, and knowing like, where that could have an impact and where sort of to connect them to. So um yeah, I think that critical thinking and then that empathy piece are both really important personality traits.
Definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So can you just kind of talk about what a day in your life looks like now?
Sure. So I thought I was like, what kind of day would actually like capture what my work looks like? Because it seems profoundly boring. I'm like, oh, I come in and I sit at my desk. But I put a little bit of thought into it, and I was like, there's a little bit too more to it than that. So I guess first I'd say like every day starts with cuddling my dog's Judge and Pasta, and reading a little bit. And then there's like a decent amount of news intake. And I think the thing I'm always listening for is I'm getting ready for the day. One is just making sure I'm like up to date and informed, because I care on what is happening in our state and in our country. And
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of a news junkie.
Hmm.
But also I think I'm always keeping sort of an ear to the ground on like how people are talking about issues that have to deal with gender equity. So like paying attention when people bring sort of a gender equity lens to an issue that like does impact everybody, but might impact women differently. So I'm always like just trying to think about how what is happening in current events relates to the work that I'm doing and the
Yeah.
context here in Montana. Um, and then I think that so much of my work is just talking with people.
Hmm.
And so we have the privilege and burden now of that all being able to happen via Zoom. So right, right. It's a real mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
But but I get to really like I get to talk with my fellow fundraisers in the state and in the country who are working on moving money to gender equity issues. I get to talk with Women's Foundation grantees and with the Women's Foundation Advisory Committee members. So that's the committee of people that actually makes the decisions about where our grants go.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
so my goal in that work is like really to be a bridge between our donors and our grantees and our advisory committee, so that we can all be effective in using the resources that we have to affect some of the change that we want to see in Montana. So it's like a lot of listening and a lot of learning. um, and then a lot of like I think just being able to recall in the moment when people are trying to problem solve or saying that they're looking for a particular thing to support because they really care about a particular issue, like being able to sort of remember and connect those people and those
Yeah.
organizations. Yeah, like in the moment, use the
Yeah.
momentum and the energy while people have it right then and just be
Oh, yeah,
able to
there's
make
that
that.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. I can help you do that. So like it really is being a bridge, and I think in order to do that, again, just trying to be trustworthy and informed is like the
Mhm.
best thing
Yeah.
that I can bring to that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in the local news, I'm sure that greatly impacts how your grants and fundraising work out.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you're the bridge between quite a few people, but then you also kind of it sounds like you do a tiny bit of background work. Do you have a favorite piece of that you enjoy more than another?
Um, like the background work or the I mean,
Yeah, or the
I
people.
think yeah, I think that the favorite piece about that connection is I mean, quite honestly, like I think most of the Women's Foundation work really like comes to a head when our committee gets together to make grants. So we have the I mean, we're just lucky and privileged enough to be able to learn about the work that's happening all across the state. And I think that sometimes um, you know, it's understandable to feel overwhelmed and discouraged sometimes when you are looking at like big social issues that you want to have an impact on.
Mhm.
They can feel daunting and bigger than yourself, and you don't really know where to get started. But when we look at the grant applications of these organizations in communities across the state, so like we had um, a couple of folks on our committee who work in the healthcare field. And we're like just really kind of having reflecting on some of the serious issues that women in Montana are facing, particularly when you look at maternal health rates in Montana. We have, I think it's 50% of our counties are maternal health deserts, which means there's very limited access for pregnant people to actually access the care that they need during their pregnancy in those counties. And we, as a committee, we were sitting and talking about this issue and just kind of trying to figure out like how do we even like, how do we know where to get involved in this issue? And then we got
Yeah.
this application, by this organization who is bringing together doulas from across the state. And a doula is somebody who it's sort of outside of the medical setting, but can work with a pregnant person to sort of support them and guide them through like what can be a huge medical and kind of scary and hopefully rewarding process. But the medical setting is not always the most relaxing or relatable setting for lots of people. Yeah, so figuring out how do you help people access that system and get support in the way that actually works for them. That's something that people in maternal health have been trying to figure out how to build that bridge. And so getting this application, the women that were on our advisory committee, seeing that this work was being done, that they didn't know was being done in the state, they were like, they were just so excited to see that it was happening, to see that people were out there, that people were trying to build up this resource, and that we had an opportunity to like really put some significant support behind it. I think just felt so meaningful. And so I think it's like seeing all of those things come together in this really lovely moment where people feel like they're being useful to one another. And I think we're all trying to just figure out how to do that as best we can. So I think that's my favorite thing is seeing people have that moment and feel connected and inspired is really great.
That's incredible. So obviously there's the maternal medical side of things that you are helping with in Montana. What other fields do you notice that Women for Montana are really helping in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think one of the things that I think is exciting, and I'll speak to Code Girls United. I hope your listeners are really informed on your work. I'm sure they are. But I think that Montana's economy is sort of, I feel like innovation is like a really big like buzzword in like how we talk about where we want our workforce to go and what opportunities we want for people. And I think that there's a lot of room to grow there as far as sort of who has access, right, to those educational opportunities in that sector. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity here within the state to really grow and expand people's skill set and to show people what kind of sectors Montana has the opportunity to really invest in and grow in that are sort of that I think help us transition from a more extractive economy, which is, I think, where Montana's economy used to be. And there's just so much opportunity. And so I see that in Code Girls United and just the way that program, there's so much demand for your program. And I know there are so many schools and communities across the state that would like to see that replicated in their communities. And I'm excited for that kind of growth. I think that there's also, within that, I think that there's a lot of people doing work within Montana's Indigenous communities. There's a really exciting coalition like trying to build up the Indigenous finance sector in Montana. So trying to think about how to create work opportunities for people to really design and to offer finance products like capital loans that you might use to start a business, like some of these sort of like technical and wonky things that need to be in place before some of this innovation can really be seized on in Montana. So trying to lay the groundwork for that, and that is super exciting to see.
Yeah, that is incredible, and especially because Montana is so rural too.
To think about how to do that in those more rural and remote communities is really great to see.
So you've been with Women for Montana for how long again?
I've been with the Women's Foundation for 3 years now.
Oh, gotcha. So what have you learned working with the foundation?
Um, let's see. I think I think quite honestly, I've learned a lot about gender equity. That's probably not surprising, uh, being at the Women's Foundation. But um, prior to coming to the Women's Foundation, I had worked with organizations that focus more broadly on economic equity and economic justice, and didn't bring quite as specific of a gender lens to it. Um, so I also think that, I've always worked in the nonprofit sector, which 75% of the nonprofit sector workers are women. So I've always worked sort of in a female dominated field. And I've always had really excellent uh, directors and leaders that I've been able to work with at organizations that have really had good benefits. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that in working at the Women's Foundation, the thing that I've realized um, is is that women in Montana need those same things, and that sectors in Montana. I wish for women that they felt just as supported in every sector that they wanted to work in as I have felt in the nonprofit sector. And so I hear, and even in listening to the Code Girls United podcast, I've heard women that you have interviewed talk about their experience in male dominated sectors and talk about how challenging it is to share ideas and to be heard,
Yeah.
and to advance to positions that they have earned.
Mhm.
I'm sure, yes, yeah, you've heard about their experiences, and to me, I just it makes me really wish for a better experience for them. And so I think just learning about the challenges that women in Montana have faced in trying to really just make a company better, or be able to support their family, or really just try
Yeah.
to implement good ideas, the idea that they would hit roadblocks at
Yeah.
every at all these opportunities just because of their gender, is disappointing to me, and I want better. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks to foundations like yours, we're making a difference. So what's one piece of advice that you received when you were starting out, or what were some of the resources that you had that you'd like to pass along to these girls coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends where you where you want to work. When I started out in philanthropy, one of the pieces of advice that I got, and I've sort of kept it in mind, is to move between working in the philanthropic sector and working for like a nonprofit that's providing services and might be grant seeking. So to move between those two things. And I think I've done that relatively well thus far. But the reason why this person gave that advice is because she said that she wanted to stay grounded in what she was trying to do. And the philanthropic sector sometimes can feel a little bit more cushy. Um, and and it can be fun to give the money away,
Right.
right? Right, exactly. It's the fun part. But the part that, not to say that this work isn't hard work, but the part of the work that's hard is really the organizations that are working in communities on the ground, and, teaching young people sort of how to be resilient in the face of challenges and how to grow their skills, working with women who are young mothers, trying to get them into stable housing, or providing safe housing for people who are experiencing violence. Like, this is the hard work that is really happening in communities across the state. And I think when that's what you want to be supporting, I think sometimes you can sit in philanthropy in your comfortable chair for a little bit too long and get a little bit farther from what you really want to be doing. So I'm not sure if that applies to every sector, but but I think the idea of being able to sort of move and change your perspective has value no matter what sector you're in. So
Yeah,
yeah, that would be the
definitely.
advice
Well,
I
thank you
would
so
share.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up here?
No, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to reflect and think and think about the work that Code Girls United is doing also through this interview process. So I'm really grateful, Makayla.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. This was an amazing conversation, and we're happy to have you on the show.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Next week on Co-Girls on Air,
believe that being curious and asking questions is one of the strongest and most fierce things that anyone I work with could do. And I say that because it only gets you mentors. Asking questions, leaning in, not being afraid to say, "Ooh, that doesn't quite make sense to me. Can you restate that? Or could you say that a different way? I'm not sure I got it 100%." Shows me as a manager that you have every intent of doing this job the best way you can figure out how to do it, and you want to understand, and you too want to serve the customer in the best way possible.